Hello and welcome to today's Office Hours presentation. This is your host, Paul Hoyt. Our Office Hours presentation is a relaxed, informal mentoring program that we hold every Monday at noon Pacific time. All these recording slides and exercises are archived in our members area, and for now the recordings are also available on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Paul Hoyt. The reasons we do Office Hours is because we know that being a successful business owner can be a great experience, but we also know that it can be tough. You need education, training, and tools and team in order to be successful. And we want you to get to know us, because when you get to know us, you'll know that first and most importantly, we really do care about you. We want you to be successful in every area of your life, whatever that means to you. We want you to find the greatness, the happiness, the divinity within yourself, and then remember it, embrace it, and live it every single day as we do. Our passion is to increase the survival rate, accelerate the growth rate, and reduce the struggle rate of businesses in America. And our vision is to help millions of CEOs and entrepreneurs accelerate their business growth and enjoy greater harmony and balance in their lives. If you find these Office Hours presentations beneficial to you, then I'd strongly encourage you to pass the word along. Every one of you knows another CEO, another business owner out there who you think or you know might bring value from these Office Hours presentations. And for now, they're absolutely free, so pass them along and invite somebody else to get value from it in the same way that you have. Our Office Hours agenda is usually an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. Then we offer some closing remarks, special offers, and invitation for next week's session, and then we go into open Q&A and coaching. So while you are listening to today's Office Hours presentation, jot down a question or two, or go ahead and type it into the chat log in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation today. I also encourage you to join us in the Awakened CEO communities on both LinkedIn and Facebook, where 4 days a week I publish the business success principle of the day, and every single day on Facebook I publish the energy of the day posting. I think we're up to day 872 in a row. Today's topic is the book Nail It, Then Scale It by Paul Ahlstrom and Nathan Furr, which has been a very significant book in my education, and hopefully after today's presentation it will be a significant book in your education too, into the art of starting up a business. As always, we try to relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the key performance areas of success that I defined in my 2004 book called The Foundation Factor. And this one's all about leadership, about your responsibility to start your business right, to get the business model squared away, to make sure that you have the right team in place, etc. So this is about leadership and your responsibility and your opportunity to be a fantastic leader in your business. We always relate the subject matter of the day to our Awakened CEO system as well, where we talk about 3 different levels of performance: the mindset, the methods, and the momentum. Your mindset is your beliefs and your perspectives. Your methods are your plans, processes, and procedures. And the momentum you establish by taking action and accelerating your velocity over time. And today's presentation is about all 3 of these, about having the mindset of a successful leader, about using the methods that are in the book Nail It, Then Scale It, and then getting into action and building momentum in your business. Today we're going to talk about the authors just a little bit. We're going to talk about the myths of entrepreneurship, the primary reasons startups fail, the characteristics of successful startups, their insight from decades of experience, the steps in the Nail It, Then Scale It growth process, fundamental concepts, and we're going to sum it all up to the bottom line. First, about the authors. This book was written by professional investors, especially Paul Ahlstrom. He's with a venture capital firm called Alta Ventures, and Nathan Furr was a PhD student at Stanford at the time that they wrote this book, and they did a fantastic job on the book. Paul has made over 100 investments over about 20 years or so, and they weren't very small investments either. They were pretty darn good investments. With the venture funds that he was a part of or led, they invested over $900 million in 20 years and caused or were in syndication with other investors that put in another $2 billion into the same ventures that Mr. Ahlstrom invested his money into. There have really been students of the startup experience. Whenever you are an institutional investor and institutional investors, venture capital funds, hedge funds, pension funds, are by definition institutional investors and run by very professional investors. Their career, their profession is built around understanding the startup experience and placing their money with companies that they think have a really good chance of success. So they've been studying this whole startup phenomenon for a long time, and they have their money and lots of money from other people on the line whenever they choose to write a check to a startup. So I really take their experience with a great deal of respect and listen to what they have to say, and I encourage you to do the same. In the book, one of the first things they talk about is the myths of entrepreneurship. They identify several different myths and talk about why they are myths and what the real truth is. The first myth they talk about is the entrepreneur as a hero. We have this sense in our society that hard work, talent, and persistence are enough, but they really are not enough. I've seen hundreds of entrepreneurs, every single one of them hardworking, every single one of them bright and talented, every single one of them just wanting to create a fair product or a product and a service that they can market at a fair price and have great relationships with their clients and their partners and everybody that they work with. And there is this vision of the individual who went to their garage and they invented a product, and by themselves they brought this product to market and made billions of dollars. I think we like to set individuals up as heroes, I think primarily because we want to believe that we can be one of those heroes. So we love the hero because we think that that's something that we want to be. But the stories of people who created it by themselves, frankly, just are never telling the whole story. That it takes a lot more than hard work and talent and persistence. It takes a good process, and it takes a good team, and yes, it takes a little bit of luck in order to be successful as well. So my encouragement to you is, if you're starting and growing a business, do not think of yourself as a hero. Think of yourself as a teammate. Think of yourself as a leader of other people and a follower of processes that are proven to help you start the business with a much higher probability of success. Speaking of that process, myth number 2 is the process myth. Unfortunately, raising a little bit of money or a lot of money, building a product, and then finding a way to sell it doesn't work very well. And that, of course, is the inventor's dilemma. The inventor, the artist, the musician says that I am a creative person. I have something that I really want to do, and I just got to do it. And once I do this, once I create this, once I build it, they will come. And unfortunately, it rarely works that way. It can work that way if you're lucky, but only about 1 or 2% of the time. That's right. If you're an inventor, musician, artist, author, 1 or 2% of the time, this blind squirrel will find an acorn, that you will find a way to take this product to market in a way that is monetizable and in a way that really gives you a lot of return on your investment. But 98% of the time, that process doesn't work at all. There is a much different process that does work, and we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. The third myth they talk about is the money myth. And unfortunately, too much money can be just as bad as too little money. That with too much money, people have a tendency to make very poor decisions about how they invest that money, and they have a tendency not to listen to the marketplace because they're not nearly as motivated to listen to the marketplace. In fact, if you've got too much money, you're strongly motivated to allow your creativity to just explode, to allow your creativity to take control of the business and of your life and just do what you want to do instead of what the marketplace wants you to do. So people who don't have very much money take the advice of the Lean Startup methodology and of this book, Nail It Then Scale It, much more readily than people who have way too much money. And I certainly have seen that as well. It's been my pleasure and my challenge to work with people who had businesses that were extremely well funded. And unfortunately, it's exactly as the book said, that they didn't make very good decisions because they didn't have to. They had a lot of money to spend. They had a lot of money that they could essentially waste on making mistake after mistake after mistake, and they find their way into the marketplace by making a lot of mistakes and in a very expensive manner rather than listening to the market, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. The primary reasons for failure that they outline in this book are, number one, poor prioritization. In other words, you put the cart before the horse, you do things out of sequence, you spend your money on things today that you could put off until tomorrow, and you don't do the things today that you really need to do today in order to give yourself the very best chance of success. I like to call prioritization of business growth sequencing. In fact, I love that term so much I went and trademarked the term about 10 years ago. Business growth sequencing is the art and science of figuring out what to do first and then what to do next in order to give yourself the very best chance of success with the minimum investment. The second primary reason for failure they talk about is no customer interaction. Again, the inventor syndrome, where I'll go to my garage and I'll invent it and then I'll try to find somebody to sell it to, as opposed to an approach that works with the customer every step along the way. Third is no business model validation. In other words, we get into business believing that we're going to be able to make money on it, but not knowing that we're going to be able to make money in business, and certainly not proving that we're able to make money in business. We have a business model and we invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars perhaps in that business model without really validating it in the marketplace. The next one is hiring people before finding customers. Now, I know that you have to build a small team to start off with, but if you try to build too big of a team before finding customers, you'll find that that can be a tremendous drain on your cash very, very quickly. In another office hours presentation, I talked about staffing and getting massive support and gave a couple of examples of how we staff up and how it's prudent to do so. But hiring a lot of people, opening up an office with 4 or 5 or 6 people on staff and getting yourself into a 20 or a 30 or a 40 or a $50,000 a month overhead can really, really be a challenge very quickly. You'd be surprised how much money you can burn through if you have 10 people on your staff, each making $100,000 a year. You can burn through $1 million or $2 million very, very quickly if you staff up. And for most part, you don't have to do that. There are exceptions to that. So if you're building a brand new software product that's going to compete with Facebook or Google, you kind of need to have a lot of funding. But for most of us, it's really a bad idea to go hire people and commit ourselves to a very high overhead before we validated our business model, but before we brought a product to the market. So in general, those things are premature scaling, that we really believe, we really know in our heart that a whole bunch of people are going to buy this stuff, and when the orders start flooding in, when the phone calls really start happening and we start selling 1,000 of these a day, we better be ready for it. Gosh, I wish that were true all of the time, but it's rarely true. Most of the time, you start out with 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 orders, and you grow organically, and you grow in a very controlled manner, and then you pump more and more and more marketing dollars into it to accelerate the growth, and you have the ability to hire staff, just behind the growth so that you can keep up with the growth, but you don't want to hire staff too much ahead of the growth because you'll do premature scaling and you'll have much higher overhead than is necessary for the business. And in general, one of the reasons that people fail as well is that they employ the waterfall developmental model. And that works with some corporate environments where you're just focusing on incremental growth, but it doesn't work very well whenever you're innovating. It works really well when you're building an airport or when you're building a large office building, but it doesn't work very well when you're being creative and you're bringing a new product or service to the marketplace. A long time ago, I think in the mid-1990s, I wrote a book called Practical Project Management, and this diagram comes from that book of the Waterfall Approach, which is what we used in the early days of computing to build computer systems. We went through a definition and planning stage, then we went into requirements analysis, then we went into design, then we constructed it, then we implemented it, and then we went into maintenance phase. And that's just the way that we did projects, because every project was typically very long, and we couldn't afford to do an iterative approach because of the extremely high cost in the construction phase. In the construction phase and the implementation phases were very, very expensive, so we had to do a very thorough job in the definition and planning phases, and a very thorough job in the requirements and analysis phase, and a very thorough job in the design phase, because once we committed to construction, once we committed to digging that hole in the ground and building our foundation, to use the analogy of a commercial office building, we couldn't change our mind. There was only one way up from there. If you're building a 30-story office building, you can't get 10 stories into it and decide that you want to change the foundation of the building. So you have to really invest a tremendous amount of time in these initial 3 phases before you even begin construction. But today, because of the quickness with which we can create prototypes, because of the quickness with which we can create new software products and change those products, the iterative approach is much wiser, is much more effective. With the iterative approach, we still do the definition and planning and the requirements analysis phase and the design phase, but we do it in an iterative fashion. We construct a very small version of the product, a prototype, and then we go back into definition and planning. And then we do it again with our first minimum viable product. And then we do it again and again and again. And because of the speed with which we can create prototypes, especially with 3D printing and offshore manufacturing, we can do things much less expensively today than we used to be able to do things. And so we can employ an iterative approach. And the reason we employ an iterative approach is because it's much, much more successful whenever we're innovating and whenever we're being highly creative. Successful startups almost always have passion and competence, and by the way, that's kind of a no-brainer. If you're not passionate about what you're going to do, and if you don't have at least some competence in the area in which you're trying to start a business, my encouragement to you is don't do it, because it's going to take a lot of emotional strength and energy, and that can only come from tapping into your own internal passions. And it's going to take a lot of intelligence, and that means you have to bring at least some level of competence to the game to start off with. And in their mind, successful startups are really teams. They're not soloists, but they're at least 2 to 3 people, and with people they call the hacker, the huckster, and the hopeful. In fact, they go as far to saying that they will never invest in a business where there is not a hacker and a huckster and a hopeful in the primary team, in the founding team of the business. To translate those into a little more acceptable language, perhaps, the hacker is the engineer, the huckster is the salesperson, and the hopeful is the visionary, the person who's going to carry the flame. In their mind, they say that you can sometimes do that with 2 people, but you can almost never do that with just 1 person. 1 person can't carry the competence and the excellence in each one of these areas. 1 person cannot successfully maintain a mindset in each one of these areas, throughout the life of the business. You have to have founders in their particular recommendation in order for the business to have even a good chance of being successful. They also say that every successful startup focuses on the pain. And in their case, monetizable pain. It's not just finding out that somebody is miserable and in pain in the marketplace, but you have to be able to monetize that pain in some way. You have to be able to turn that into a solution and turn the solution into a viable business model. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. Their insight from decades of experience say that most businesses fail somewhere in between having the idea and the mass market. It's taking that idea, turning it into a product, taking that product and turning it into a viable business model, and taking that business model and scaling it that causes the challenges for startups. And it's mostly because people have tried to sell a product that did not have sufficient demand. And fortunately, companies that follow the nail it then scale it process have a much greater increased probability of success. And here is the nail it then scale it process. Step number 1 is to nail the pain, the really big pain. Step number 2 is to nail the solution. Step number 3 is to nail the go-to-market strategy. Step 4 is to nail the business model. And then and only then do we scale the business. Do we hire people because we know that we have something that's going to work. Let's talk about each one of these 5 steps individually. First of all, it's about nailing the pain. You have to get out of the office. You have to talk to people who you think are your customers or clients. You have to understand their tears and their anguish. You want to collect their words so that you can use their words in your marketing campaigns and marketing messages. And you need to do an awesome amount of market research in order to develop your monetizable pain hypothesis. The monetizable pain hypothesis says that we have found significant pain in the marketplace. We have developed a solution that is going to relieve that pain, and we can sell our product or service at enough of a margin to where we can create a business around it, and we can make a profit, and we can scale our business. We can build our business based upon the profits that we will enjoy after a reasonable amount of time to establish market traction and reaching the break-even point at our business. The tears and the anguish are the big part of this. The big message about this is that we want to find not just a little bit of discomfort, not just a little bit of annoyance, but we want to find real tears. We want to find people who are complaining out loud. We want to find people who are desperate to buy something in order to relieve their pain. We want to sell a mediocre cheeseburger to a starving man. We want to sell a $5 bottle of water to somebody who's dying of thirst. We want to be able to really find significant pain in the marketplace, prove that the pain exists in the marketplace, and then go find a way to relieve that pain. And that comes in step number 2, which is when we nail the solution. That's when we translate our monetizable pain hypothesis into a minimum feature set. And we run 3 different tests. First of all, we run a virtual prototype, which means that we're just talking to people about the way we believe that we can solve their pain and bring them significant value, and getting their feedback and adjusting our plans in an iterative approach to changing our hypothesis, to changing our design just a little bit before we create a real prototype, or maybe even 2 or 3 or 4 real prototypes. And we go back again to our customer and say, is this what you had in mind? Do you think this will really work for you? What can I change this? What can I add to make it more valuable to you? What can I take out that you don't really need that will make it cost less? And really, really listen to your customer every phase of this process with every iteration of the cycle. And then we create a minimum viable product, to use the lean startup methodology's terminology, and create a product with this minimum feature set that can provide a solution to the pain that we know that exists in the marketplace. Step number 2 is really important. We want to nail the solution through an iterative process of building a solution, testing it out, building a slightly different version, testing it out, building a third different version, and testing it out before we go to market with our product. And we always have to ask, is this what you were looking for? Is this what you would really need? And we always have to listen, 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 and not just listen, but then take action based upon the insight that the marketplace is sharing with us. Then we nail the go-to-market strategy. And their strong recommendation, by the way, is we do this at the same time that we are nailing the solution. At the same time that we are nailing the solution, we study the market dynamics and the key players. We understand what the customer's buying process is, which is, by the way, how they find out about new products, how they want to buy it in terms of channels of distribution. We find people who are already selling to our customers, etc., and we sell the product from the very start. Their hypothesis is that if people are not willing to buy that prototype, if people are not willing to pay you in advance for the product that you have yet to create, then you're not relieving enough pain. Because if you are relieving enough pain, and if you have found a marketplace that is willing to buy your products and eager to buy your products, they should be willing and eager to buy your product ahead of you actually creating the product, to be one of those design partners with you, to pay you in advance for the product that you're going to create tomorrow, because they want to be first in line in order to get your product and use your product. So that's a very interesting strategy that they have, nailing the go-to-market strategy at the same time that you are nailing the solution. Then we also want to nail the business model, which is an opportunity for you to revisit all of your numbers, because the original projections that you had, the original financial model that you had, was just guesswork anyway. And my goodness, does that ever speak to my experience? It's been my pleasure to help business owners create 120, 130, something like that, different financial models over the last 15 years as a business consultant. And I will guarantee you one thing, that not a single one of those businesses ended up having numbers that were exactly like the financial projections that we put together. If we were within 20 or 25% of the revenue projections and the expense projections, we did a pretty good job. Because it always changes when you get to the market. It always costs you a little bit, usually a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less to make your product. It usually costs you a little bit more to market your product. It usually costs you a little bit more in overhead than you thought that it was going to, even when you thought that you were being conservative when it comes to the financial models. So in order to nail your business model, once you have nailed the pain, once you have nailed the solution, once you have nailed your go-to-market strategy, then you have to nail the business model itself and say, okay, now what does it really cost me to build it? What does it really cost me to deliver it? And what can I really sell it for in the marketplace? And one of my favorite questions, can I raise the price? Because oftentimes just raising the price, especially if you've nailed the pain and nailed the business model, will allow you to make a lot more money without much effort at all, other than just changing the numbers on your marketing materials. You have to ask yourself, what are our margins? What is our break-even point? And can we make enough money doing this? And if your margins are not sufficient, if it's going to take you too long to break even and you can't make enough money, then we do not scale it. We don't think that we're going to be able to make up for poor margins with volume, because that's very, very rarely done. You want to create a product that you can bring to market at a sufficient margin. And by sufficient margin, I mean the target is 50 or 60%. I like to see products that have a 55 or 60% margin, because if you start going down to 40% and 30% margins, it takes a lot of volume in order for you to hit that break-even point. So then we've nailed the business model. We understand what our go-to-market strategy is. We understand how we're going to make our money. Then we can scale it. And when we scale it, please understand that the nature of your operations are going to change significantly. You're moving from a creative exploration mindset to an operational discipline mindset. And by the way, a lot of CEOs cannot make this transition. They may have been a great CEO for being the visionary for a company and for piloting the company, for leading the company through these initial stages of customer discovery and product innovation, but they may not be the right leader at all for this next stage of business, which is when we move into analysis and implementation mode. So it's rare that a CEO will be well balanced in between being a visionary, having great relationship skills, having great analysis skills, and having great implementation skills. Usually CEOs are highly creative people, and implementation is not their gift. They have to bring on other people in their team, the COO, the CFO of their team, to help nail the business at this stage of the growth so they can scale the business model. One thing that's for sure, that as you grow your business, that players will come and players will grow. You'll see some people that don't want to work at companies that are growing rapidly because it's too much stress and pressure for them. They only want to work with companies who are in the first few months or few years of growth. You'll find other people who want to stay there, but the position outgrew them in some way. They might have been vice president of sales and they were able to successfully sell $1 million or $2 million worth of products and services a year, but not 10 million or 20 million or 50 million. You had to bring on somebody else in order to scale the business from that perspective. Same is true with manufacturing and engineering and customer service and financial management and every other department, every other key performance area, every other functional area of your business, that you will find in some cases that the people you have in those positions in day one are able to grow with the company and stay in those positions and do a quality job over time. But you will find the overwhelming majority of the time, 60, 70, 80% of the time, that the people who are working really well today are not going to work very well in that position when the company is 10 times larger than it is today. So delegation and systematization and flexibility are the key, and you really have to become very, very good at goal definition and achievement, about creating strategies, about creating plans, about creating long-term goals, mid-term goals, short-term goals, about creating high-level goals at the executive level of your business, mid-level goals at the middle management layer, and very specific tactical goals at the individual level in order to successfully scale your business. So here's a review of the fundamental concepts that are in the Nail It and Scale It book. First, get into the field. Just as the Lean Startup methodology specifies, get out of your office, get out of your garage, get out into the field and talk to your customers. If you're going to fail, fail fast. Fail fast with a minimum amount of investment so that you can move on to the next opportunity, and you can continue to try innovation after innovation until you find one that is absolutely monetizable and one that you can make millions of dollars with. Keep the products simple because simplicity wins. Very, very complex solutions are difficult to communicate, and they're difficult to sell. They're difficult to sell because the confused mind will not buy. And if you have a very complex product in the marketplace, one that takes hours of explanation, one that takes days or weeks or months of education and training in order for somebody to use, you're not going to find it a very receptive marketplace at all. So we strongly encourage you to keep it simple because simplicity wins over complexity every single time. Start small, not start one, but start small with 2 or 3 founders, and then stay lean as you grow and be brutally honest with yourself and your colleagues about what's working, about what's not working. It could be that your baby's ugly. It could be that your idea could be brilliant, and that doesn't mean that you're not brilliant. It just means that the idea it didn't hit sufficient enough of a nerve, enough pain in the marketplace in order to be commercially viable. Your job is not to be right. Your job is to discover the truth, which is a much different perspective. A lot of people out there seem to take their self-image and self-esteem on whether or not their particular idea, their baby that they've been working on for a while, was a great idea. Don't let that be your source of self-esteem. Don't build your self-image around whether or not your creativity is going to create a monetizable business model. Make your self-image be built around, your self-esteem be built around your ability to discover the truth in the marketplace, to discover opportunities for you to address a very significant pain with the solutions that you are creating. Other fundamental concepts, and this is an interesting one. As soon as you start selling, you are dead because you go into production mode. And I think this is a little bit misstated here. It's not as soon as you start selling, it's as soon as you start to scale your business, you are dead to creativity, because then you're interested only in scaling the business as opposed to creating something that the marketplace really wants and needs. In fact, this book recommends, of course, that you develop your go-to-market strategy and prove the monetization of your hypothesis as you are building it, as you are going through your iterative approaches. So this is as soon as you start selling on massive scale, as soon as you really start scaling your business, you will have people at your business whose focus is on squeezing the profits or squeezing the cost out of your model, about increasing the volume with which you work, etc., so that you can make more money, as opposed to finding people who are really interested in listening to your customers and changing the product over time based upon that market feedback. One of the things we know for sure is that random positive feedback is very, very addicting. In fact, if you study psychology at all, you'll see that there are a lot of different feedback mechanisms out there, and random positive feedback is the most addicting and the most powerful means of feedback and reward that we can have. That's the one that builds the strongest habits. So if you have something and you can find one or two or three or four people who really love your product, the strong intention is the strong belief is that that means that hundreds or thousands of millions of people will also love it too. And that's not necessarily the case at all. You can have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people who are very, very passionate about your product, but that does not mean that enough people are going to be passionate about your product in order for you to turn it into a monetizable business. And man, I have seen and worked with people who have been trying to bring a product to market for 2, 3, 5, maybe even a dozen years, and they keep getting this random positive feedback, and it causes them to keep going month after month after month and year after year after year. But the truth is that they are not likely to ever create a viable business based along that product if it's taken them that long to get it to market. They just haven't nailed the pain enough, and they haven't nailed the solution enough. The investors will tell you that they want you to be very, very disruptive. They want you to look for a 10x advantage with a company that's going to grow extremely rapidly in a very large marketplace, so that they can have an opportunity to get at least a 10x return on their investment. They want something where they can put in $100,000 and turn that into $1 million worth of equity position, in 3 to 5 years. In fact, they really want something that they can turn that $100,000, into $10 million or $20 million over time. They really want a 20x or a 30x or a 100x return, but they're not going to invest in you, at least not the successful and professional investors, unless they see a pretty good chance of it being at least a 10x return on their investment. One key here, by the way, is that if you have a business that's up and running, your current customers are not likely to be the same ones that are looking for this disruptive technology, this innovation. If you're innovating, you're most likely have to find a brand new customer base, because your current customers are already buying what you have, and that much disruptive technology, that much change is not comfortable to them much of the time. Now, sometimes, by the way, in high-tech products, your current customers will buy that disruptive technology. Apple being a very good example of that. Your Macintosh clients bought the iPod. Your iPod clients bought the smartphones. Your smartphone clients bought the iPads. And in each case, there was a disruptive technology that Apple was able to sell not only to their existing customer base, but to new customers that they were attracting into their customers as well. And by the way, Apple is one of those 1 in a million companies that has become the world's most successful company. The company in the world with the highest market capitalization, because they were able to get lucky, time after time after time, because they were able to nail it. That doesn't mean that that's a good plan for you. Just because your next door neighbor goes to Las Vegas and wins $1 million playing the slot machines doesn't mean that that's a good plan for you. Just because your brother-in-law bought a lottery ticket and won $100,000 doesn't mean that's a good retirement plan. No, we want to create a plan that gives you the highest probability of success, and that means following the principles in the Nail It Then Scale It book. In my language, we want you to engage with the marketplace just as quickly as possible, and so that you can learn the lessons that only the marketplace can teach you, and then have a relentless pursuit of financial stability. If you've listened to a lot of these office hours presentations, if you listen to my business survival boot camp, if you listen to almost anytime I talk to people, you'll hear me say this as the #1 recommendation. Engage with the marketplace as quickly as possible so you can learn the lessons that only the marketplace can teach you, and then have a relentless pursuit of financial stability, because by definition, if you do not have a financially stable business, you are not out of the woods. In my definition, you're not out of startup mode. You're still in the mode of being at extremely high risk, until you create a way to be financially stable with your business. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is we want you to dream really, really big, but we want you to start really, really small. We want you to stay flexible, and we want you to be humble, and we want you to be smart about growing your business to give you the highest probability of success. Today we talked about the authors, we talked about the myths of entrepreneurship, we talked about the primary reasons startups fail and the characteristics of successful startups. We talked about the insight coming from decades of experience from the authors Paul Ahlstrom and Nathan Furr. We talked about steps in the nail it and scale it process. We reviewed their fundamental concepts and summed it all up to the bottom line. So here's what we want you to do. I want you to be objective with yourself and your teammates about how well you are employing the principles of the nail it and scale it process in your company. Are you just building something that you want to build in hopes that you're going to be able to sell it? Or are you really focused on discovering the truth, on finding pain in the marketplace, and then proving that you have found a way to monetize a business bringing your solution to that pain to the marketplace? I also want you to go buy the book. I think this is a tremendous book, something you ought to have in your library. Go spend your 20 bucks, go spend your 10 bucks or 12 bucks on the Kindle version of it. Buy the book and read the details of the book so that it really becomes ingrained in your subconscious mind, and you can really leverage the wisdom that's in this book into your own personal process for growing your business and into your own abundance and prosperity. I also want you to build your team, 2 to 3 people at a minimum, and then once you have really discovered a way to make money, then you want to get to number 4 and 5 on the team. So those 2 to 3 people at a minimum are the engineer, the salesperson, and the visionary, and very, very quickly after that, you want the CFO, the financial person, and you want the operations person, the COO, to help you build the business and scale that business. Do not think about doing it by yourself, because you're just setting yourself up for a world of struggle and a world of challenges if you don't have the right mindsets, the right competence, the right excellence on your team. I want you to review additional office hours presentation, and I'll give you some hints, those in a second, about ones you might also do for your homework and exercises. And then, of course, get coaching and support in order to understand these principles and successfully implement them in your business. And that's something we would love to have the opportunity to help you with. Here are some related office hours presentations. If you want to go learn some more about great principles about starting your business, you can look at number 61 on the E-Myth, number 71 on the Startup Owner's Manual, number 81 on the Power of Why, number 94 on the Lean Startup Methodology, and number 105 we did recently on how to be great at product development, where we talk at length about how to develop great products and services using the Nail It to Scale It and the Lean Startup Methodology principles and processes. We're going to go into open Q&A and coaching in just a minute. First of all, we're going to entertain comments and questions on the subject matter of the day, and then any other issues you want to talk about. I really love to hear what your biggest takeaways are and what insights are you gained from this presentation and what you're going to focus on. Here at the Hoyt Management Group, we pride ourselves on having a wide variety of services so that you can get just the right service that's exactly right for your company right now, no matter whether you're just getting started or whether you've got $20 or $30 million in revenue. We have education and training services to teach you to do it for yourself, and a lot of services where we hold your hand and do it with you. Strategic plans, business plans, financial models, sales processes, sales scripts, all kinds of things and ways in which we love to work with you in order for you to create the things that you need to create, put the plans in place that you need to put into place in order to grow your business. And in some cases, we do it for you as well. There are some things that you can just throw over the wall and trust that we will deliver a quality product back to you in the agreed upon time frame. Our next office hours is going to be next Monday, April the 18th. I haven't decided what I'm going to talk about yet. But if you would like for me to talk about something that's interesting to you, you can go to paulsurvey.com and let me know what a subject matter might be of interest to you. And we'll do our best to include that in some future office hours presentation. In between now and the time that we talk next on April the 18th, do your homework. And with that, let's open it up for questions and answers for the day. And I know this was a fairly long presentation, so we'll stay on the line maybe 5 or 10 minutes afterwards if you have questions and discussion topics you want us to entertain. Stephanie, first question, please.
Okay. First question. What is the difference between this and the lean launch methodology?
The lean startup methodology is, first of all, they're very, very similar. The similarities are they want you to talk to the marketplace and they want you to use an iterative approach. The lean startup methodology focuses a little bit more on the approach, the way that you get out and talk to your clients, and what they call pivoting, which is taking the feedback from your potential customers or your real customers and then changing your product. Nail It Then Scale It talks about nailing your go-to-market strategy and actually selling to your customers in the very early stages of your business. And the Nail It Then Scale It really focuses on the team. The lean startup methodology focuses a lot more on the process than they do the team. Nail It Then Scale It essentially says that you can't execute the process successfully, and you certainly can't scale the business successfully unless you focus on the team from the very, very start. So I like both of them blended together. Get yourself a great team with an engineer, a salesperson, and a visionary, and follow a process by which you engage with the marketplace as quickly as possible to learn the lessons that only the marketplace can teach you, and then have a relentless pursuit of financial stability with your financial people and your operations people being brought onto the team at that point in time. So very similar, but slightly different in their focus. My strong encouragement is to read both books. Listen to the office hours on lean startup methodology and buy that book and read it for yourself. Listen to this office hours again on Nail It Then Scale It, and then buy that book and read it for yourself so that you can really get these principles, these concepts and principles ingrained in your subconscious mind so you can give yourself the very best chance at massive success. Stephanie, next question or comment.
Got a couple of takeaways here. The biggest takeaways: engage the marketplace, stay lean, and create your team.
I love it. You got it. Awesome. Awesome. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much.
Here's a good one. How do I hire people without money?
Well, there is a lot of ways to hire people without money, fortunately. The biggest way is to bring them on as founders, is to bring them on as partners in the business. Invite them to play the game with you. The game of how do we grow this business without having a heck of a lot of money. That's one of the ways to hire people without money. The other way, of course, is to go get the money and then hire the people. And there are lots and lots of ways of going to get the money. You can get that seed capital, that first $50,000, that first $100,000, or even $250,000 from family and friends, and we can show you how to do that. Or you may be able to cash in some of your own retirement savings, or you may be able to borrow money based upon your own credit. I encourage you to be cautious about borrowing money because you do have to pay that back at some point in time. But there are a lot of innovative ways in which you can grow your business and expand your business on very little money. In fact, we did an office hours presentation on that just a couple of weeks ago about how to grow and expand with limited funds. And I encourage you to go back and listen to that because we talked about all kinds of different ways that you can go get the money and ways that you can grow your business without having a lot of money. So go listen to that one. But my favorite way is to make sure that you've got other partners with you, other people who are equally invested so that they can pick you up when you are down, you can pick them up when they are down, that you can really have each other's backs, that you can mastermind, that you can brainstorm, that you can create together, because I guarantee you that you'll be able to create a much stronger business working with a partner than you will be able to create it on your own. I like to say that God does not give all of the great ideas to just one person. No matter how brilliant you are, that you can be assured that somebody else out there has an idea that's really going to be valuable to you. And the only way you're going to find that idea is to ask them. Somebody out there has talents and experiences that are going to be extremely valuable to you. And the only way you're going to be able to leverage that talent and experience is by bringing them onto the team. And if you don't have any money, maybe the only way to bring them onto the team is as a co-founder, as somebody who has an equity interest in the company and is putting in sweat equity in the same way that you are. Thank you for that question. Next question, please.
All righty. What is the break-even point?
Yeah, I mentioned the break-even point earlier in the presentation, so I appreciate that question. The break-even point is the amount of revenues that you need to have in order to break even in the business. In other words, to be on the income statement, you need to be, at $0 net income. The way that we determine the break-even point is by understanding what our gross margin is for each one of the products that we sell and understanding what our gross profit is every time that we sell a product. So here's an example. Let's say that you're selling a product for $100 and it costs you $50 to make it and deliver it. That means that you have a $50 gross profit and a 50% gross margin every time that you sell a product. If you're running a $10,000 overhead, it means that you have to sell $20,000 worth of services, products and services, in order to generate $10,000 worth of gross profit in order to cover your $10,000 worth of operating expenses. The calculation there is pretty easy. The challenge, of course, is that that operating expense number changes a lot over time. That as you grow your business, your operating expenses, sometimes we call those your fixed expenses, that they're not really fixed. That as you grow your business, they vary slightly, always increasing a little bit at the same time that your revenues are increasing. So it's never, it's never something that my overhead is $10,000 today and my overhead is going to stay at $10,000, every day until I'm able to break even. That rarely happens. What happens is that as your revenues grow up to $20,000 a month, that those operating expenses also go to $10,000, $11,000 to $12,000 to $13,000. They don't grow at the same pace of revenue. If they did, by the way, you would never break even. But they grow slowly as your revenues are growing more rapidly, so that eventually you hit that break-even point. There are some actual mathematical formulas for calculating the break-even, but the easy way to look at it is how much do I have to sell in order to generate sufficient gross profit in order for me to have $0 net income. In other words, to cover all of my operating expenses at my company. And that is your break-even point expressed in terms of the revenues that you have to have at your company in order to start to make money on paper. By the way, your cash flow break-even point is much different than your on-paper income statement break-even point, because you can spend cash in a lot of ways that are not reflected on the income statement. You can spend cash, for fixed assets, for accounts receivable, for marketing ahead of time, for in a lot of other ways in order to grow your business. So call us if you'd like a better explanation. I love talking to people about accounting and numbers, but it is very important for every CEO to understand what their break-even point is, to understand how much revenue they absolutely have to have in order to take care of their personal financial needs and pay all of the operating expenses at a business. Great question. Next question, Stephanie.
Okay. How do I find some additional founders, and how do I decide what talent I really need? Good one.
Well, the way we figure out what kind of talent we need is we're honest with ourselves about, do I know how to sell? Do I love to sell? Am I good at operations? Am I good at the numbers? Or what is my gift, to really understand that. And there are, by the way, a lot of different assessments that you can take to help you understand what your gifts are, what your natural tendencies are, what your passions are, if you don't know those for yourself. Young people, by the way, 20, 25, 30 years old, are oftentimes surprised when they take one of these personality profiles, one of these assessments, and it comes back and says, you're really the king of the jungle, or you're really the mechanic, or you really need to be, the ditch digger. Us old folks are not terribly surprised because we've been around for a really long time, and we've taken a few of these assessments, so we understand, what our DISC score was, and what our Myers-Briggs score was, and what our Enneagram score was, and what our, what all of these different profile tests are telling us about ourselves and our natural talents and our natural tendencies. So you can, first of all, take a profile if you need to do that, and if you need some recommendations, just give me a call. I'm happy to help you find a profile that's really going to meet your needs. And that's step number one, is understand what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, where your growth opportunities are, so you know who to get on your team. Out here in Silicon Valley, there are a number of meetups where people can go to actually find founders for their businesses. And there's one called Startup Founders, I think is the name of it. So you can go to these groups, meetings, where you can find a lot of people who are looking to join teams. That I want to be a founder at a business, but I don't want to start it by myself. And you can be sure to find other people who want to start the business. Just a word of caution: if you are an engineer and your buddy Pete is an engineer, that doesn't mean that by starting a business together that you're going to have a successful business. What it means is you're going to be a little stronger in the area of engineering. It doesn't mean that you're going to be stronger in sales. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be stronger visionaries, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be stronger in financial management or operations management. It just means you're going to have a better engineering team. So I've seen people make that mistake before, saying, I'm a coach and I'm struggling in my business, and maybe if I team up with John, who's also a coach and he's struggling in his business, that together we'll have a stronger presence in the marketplace. We'll be more credible because there's two of us together, and we'll have a stronger business. That almost never works. One of you's got to sell. So if you're really good at delivery, then get somebody on your team that's really good at sales. If you're really good at sales, get somebody on your team who's really good at delivery, because those are the most important key performance areas. Leadership is most important. Sales and delivery are the next layer of importance, and you need to understand that so that you can build your team out right. But hopefully in your hometown that you can, find a place where founders go to meet each other. And if not, hey, it doesn't cost you very much at all to start your own meetup group for finding co-founders, and you never know who's going to show up at one of those meetup groups. Hopefully that was helpful. Next question or comment, Stephanie.
Okay. Can you help me find the people that I do need on my team?
The answer is absolutely yes. Thank you for asking that. If you listen to my business survival boot camp, I think it is, and a lot of other presentations I say that the most important question in all of business, the number one question that you need to ask yourself as an entrepreneur, is who can I get on my team to help me form a great team? And we are some of those people that you can get on your team to help you form a great team. It's been my pleasure over the last 15 years to have dozens and dozens of people ask me that very same question. Who can I get on my team? How can I find those people on my team? How can I compensate people on my team? And I'm happy to help them face that challenge and overcome that obstacle and solve that problem through our coaching systems, through our planning systems that we have in place. So I'd be honored to have that conversation with you. Just give us a call and we'll talk about who needs to be on your team and how you can add those people to your team going forward after we do an assessment of your strengths and weaknesses and your capabilities and what you really want to do, so that we can make that recommendation from a place of knowingness as opposed to just a blind recommendation. You'll hear me say oftentimes that what is it, that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. That means if I tell you what you need to do without me really understanding where you are and where you want to go, then I'm really not being very professional about it. I'm just trying to sell you what I got instead of helping you achieve the business of your dream by helping you find what you really need. And I got 102. Stephanie, do we have any more questions? If we do, I'll take one more and then we'll call it a day. Do we have any more?
Got one more here.
Okay.
This is from one of the emailed in questions. I really want to make this product because I know it's a great idea. What should I do?
Well, if you really want to make the product because you know it's a great idea, then validate that. Prove it to yourself. Prove it to yourself. Prove it to your teammates. Prove it to your family and friends. Prove it to your investors. Prove that this is really a great idea. And by the way, I'm with you on that. I'm a highly creative person. I create things all the time. As my Stephanie will tell you, I'm writing books, I'm doing this, I'm creating things, I'm creating office hours presentations every week. I'm writing 2 or 3 books all at the same time. I'm a highly creative person. And I've learned the hard way that that doesn't necessarily mean that what really, really floats my boat and gets me excited is of sufficient enough market demand to turn that into a viable business product, to turn that into a good business model. So, if you got to be creative, go be creative, but go out and make your number one mantra to yourself is, I want to discover the truth about this product or this service's market viability. Whatever that proof is, it could be, 1 or 2% of the time it happens that the audience just loves, the marketplace just loves exactly what you came out with, the first or the second iteration, and they buy it in a lot of quantities, and you're able to make a great business out of that. But that only happens 1 or 2 or 3% of the time. 97% of the time, 98% of the time, they don't love it in sufficient enough quantity. Make it be your passion, not just to create what you want, but to discover your truth about that product or service in such a way that it conserves your financial resources. If you're going to fail, fail fast. If you're going to discover the truth, discover it economically, discover it quickly so that you can move on to that next invention. Here's one thing about highly creative people that I know is that our creativity doesn't stop. When we create invention number 1, if that doesn't work, we're going to go to invention number 2, and invention number 3, and invention number 4. We're going to write book number 3, book number 5, book number 7, every single step along the way, learning more about the process of creating products that the marketplace wants to buy, every step of the way learning how to listen to the marketplace, every iteration of that learning how to discover the truth rapidly at a minimal investment, and turning ourselves into much more successful entrepreneurs who are able to take these great ideas we have and turn them into products that can make us a lot of money. And that's my wish for you, is that each and every one of you out there is able to take your business concepts and dream and turn them into a viable business model that makes you and your family lots and lots and lots of money. And we'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you how we can support you in that process. Give us a call, give us an email, consume our stuff, and we'd love to talk to you about how we can support you. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much for your kind attention and for being on this office hours presentation or listening to the recording. And until we meet again, this is Paul Hoyt and Stephanie May wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.